Which of the following is not a stage associated with the acquisition of a spoken language? So spoken language is really a kind of key word to look at in this kind of a question. So when someone's trying to learn a new language, a second language, a third language, or whatever it happens to be, there are different sort of stages they go through. One of the stages is a silent period. Choice D is something that they go through. Usually when they're first listening to people speak it, they're not speaking that much because they don't feel comfortable with the language. They're kind of practicing in their heads, sort of what we would call internal private speech, where they're thinking about how they're going to say things, but they're not really speaking that much yet. Silent period is a pretty normal part of language development. Formulaic speech is something that typically happens a little bit after that silent period, where they start trying to express themselves, but instead of creating their own sort of original syntactic constructions, making phrases and sentences that are uniquely their own, they're using sort of memorized phrases. And a lot of us who've taken a language maybe in high school or college but don't speak it that regularly often remember a lot of formulaic phrases, ways that we memorize to ask certain questions or things like that. But we might not be able to really speak that language and create our own statements that are unique to how we want to say something. Usually after formulaic speech, a language learner will move into an experimental phase where they start to create their own original, impromptu, unique phrases. And the more proficient they get with that, they eventually enter what we call fluency, where they have a full command of that language. So formulaic speech, fluency, silent period, those are all part of the acquisition of a new spoken language. The orthographic stage is part of literacy acquisition, the ability to read and write, but it is not part of the spoken language, and that's what's so important about recognizing the idea of a spoken language. The orthographic phase is when a reader gets much faster and more accurate in their reading because they're reading big chunks of text, and they're reading with more automaticity and all of those sorts of things. But to develop a language, you wouldn't have to learn to read at all. You could learn a language just orally. So orthographic stage doesn't necessarily apply to language development. It's really more about literacy development, the ability to read and write. Then the orthographic stage is an important stage. So spoken is the key word here, and that's why choice C, the orthographic stage, is the correct answer.